almost time to talk about the fences. It's time to discuss operations and expenses. It's really time to elevate small businesses. It's time for Joe to drop his knowledge, it's relentless. This rhyme of mine is getting a bit ridiculous. So here we go, we're live with Joe. Enjoy the show.
What is up, Fence fam? So good to be back with you guys, virtually as it were, for another episode of Live Ask the Experts Live Q&A, where we bring on industry experts to talk about what they've got going on in our niche of the industry. Before we get into it, if you're listening to this as a podcast or on the podcast, you're listening to a recorded version of a live conversation I host most every Saturday, starting at 10 a.m. Central and going for about an hour, or at least until the conversation wraps up. Who knows where the conversation takes us, I guess is the point. If you are listening to the podcast and you'd like to interact with us live in the comments section, check us out at youtube.com/Joe Everest and participate in the conversation, like I said, most every Saturday starting at 10 a.m. Guys, before we dive too deep into it, I also want to thank the Expert Professional Wood Care team. They sponsored the live show. They've been sponsors, or I've been a customer longer they've been sponsors, because it is a great product. Actually, they're sponsors because I was a customer. We like the product a lot. My team likes working with it a lot. Obviously, our customers are really happy with it. They treat me right, and they treat you right as well. If you guys are looking for maybe an alternate solution, or you haven't tried staining out, you ought to check out the team over at Expert Professional Wood Care Products. Caleb, Ashley, and the entire team will take great care of you, just like they take great care of me. Guys, thank you so much. With all that being said, if you guys saw the intro, you know who the guest is. He needs no introduction. I've heard him speak, probably half a dozen times. Every time's a new message, and every time I'm at the edge of my seat and taking notes. I want to clarify a message I heard, and I think it'd be good for you guys to hear the message as well. All that being said, let's bring him up. The one, the only, Robert Whittaker. Robert, how are you?
Hey, Joe. What's up, buddy? How are you doing?
I'm doing so well. I appreciate you making time to come on.
Oh, man, for sure. Thank you. I guess we might as well clarify. FinStech is not October 24th. That's my birthday. I don't know how that all happened, but we like the background, so we kept it there. FinStech in a month. So
Around the corner.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah,
and you know what? Everyone I've talked to, I've talked to a few people. Pre-registration is up from last year, and last year, from all accounts, was a banner year there in Nashville. So it's shaping up to be a great show in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, it's interesting. You just said that, and it made me click. Salt Lake's a little bit more challenging of a destination. You can argue what time of the year is better or worse or anything like that. But following something exceptional like Nashville, I think that it can compensate for location or timing or whatever it might be. And we were talking about that this week about, hey, if you're constantly doing the right thing, when you do make a mistake, you're provided a little bit more grace. Or if you do the right thing, sometimes people just go support you when it's a little bit more inconvenient. Now, I don't think Salt Lake's inconvenient. Being out of the DFW area, it's pretty easy. But I guess through the 20, 30 years of doing this, they found that if we could do it always in Nashville, we should get the biggest attendance. But yeah, we are. Everything I've seen, we're about 1,000 people ahead of schedule.
And that number keeps growing.
And that's actually 1,000 ahead of last year. And last year we were almost about to be there. So technically, we even have more time. I think we're going to have close to probably 5,000 to 6,000 in attendance. And they tasked us with about 1,000 people attendance at the party, and we have well over that already. So I think we're going to be close to. Yeah, so it's going to be good, man. It's going to be good.
It's I tell you what, and I'm excited to get to Salt Lake City. Guys you talk to that are hesitant, they're mainly it's about the weather, right? They're like, well, it's pretty far north. It's in February. One thing that they kind of instilled in us at mid-year is these people are ready for winter weather. I mean, they deal with it. Yeah. Every year, year in, year out. It's not like, so in my market, we got 7 inches of snow Thursday into Friday, and it kind of everything ground to a halt just because we're not used to getting that much in one time. Whereas Salt Lake, the lady I was talking to said we could get 20 inches overnight, and we'd have it clear and ready for you guys to walk into the convention hall the next morning. They're just set up
Yeah.
and ready for it.
No, exactly. It's interesting. A bunch of people's flights got canceled leaving Fort Worth because like Georgia's getting a lot of snow there,
Yep.
but Salt Lake got snow and their flight departed. And so you're exactly right. So yeah, I'm super stoked about it. I don't really think the destination, the timing, or anything like that should affect you constantly learning.
Right.
And like I said just a minute ago, just because it might be not as convenient as the other one doesn't mean that once you get there, the nuggets change. And so,
Yeah.
man, it's going to be good. So if we have time, maybe we can dive into some of the cool stuff that's going on in FinStech. But
Of
in the
course. Of
meantime,
course.
not October 24th. It's February 25th through the 28th.
But the colors are right. The colors are right.
The colors are, yeah, totally right. That's why we left it up there. So,
I should have said that in the intro. It was like the only other person that's more obsessed with a color than I am would be the one, the only, because your life is purple. Like there's no doubt about it.
yeah.
Everything is purple.
Yeah.
How did you?
Yeah. I
Have
mean,
we talked about this before? Is how you settled on purple? Have we talked about that? I don't know that we have.
yeah. Yes, I can tell you how I settled on it, but I can tell you how I'm going to claim it. Okay. So,
Sure.
So moved down to Fort Worth. My brother owned Mean Green Lawn and Landscape and wore red shirts. Like that doesn't make any sense. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, largest landscape company in the world wears red shirts." I said, "Well, we'll never be the largest if we copy him." I would have been totally fine second best. That was my ego getting in the way. A couple weeks later, he shows up. He has blue shirts. So what are you doing? He said, "Well, you didn't like the red shirts, and I really like blue." And anyways, he forward went on to doing green. And honestly, the shirts, while it would have mattered, what makes you happy in business, sometimes you just do, right? So, anyways, TCU is purple. And
Okay.
what I found was TCU, like you can go on their website and pull their color codes, and it was just so obvious, especially being in DFW, like everybody had those color codes of purple. So it was very, you know, copy, paste, repeat. Well, anyways, the reason why I started Purple Coaching and just called it Purple is because most people knew me as Purple. So no matter, Joe, and you know this too, like no matter how you want your brand to be, if you're the brand, then it's going to be what it is. So, I'm the
Yeah.
Purple People teacher, or, I'm the Purple guy or whatever. But my wife posted on actually October 24th that my twin brother and I wore red, he wore blue. Well, that makes purple. And she's
Okay.
like, whoa, so she put that on my mind. So I don't know if you saw, but Stephen Covey, who wrote The
Yes.
Speed of Trust and Trust Inspire, me and him were leaving Joe T's after one of the evening events, and he said, "Robert, after getting to know you, can I tell you why I think you ended on purple?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love that." And we were driving, and my truck seats were purple, and he said, "Robert," and he didn't know the story on purple. He goes, "Robert, the Democrats are blue, the Republicans are red. And if we can get them together, it would make purple. And I think that you're going to have something to do with that." He said, "I don't think you're a politician, but I do believe that you are a great connector and not a great divider. I'm going to see you take the red and the blues and blend them together. And that's what's going to be purple." And I was like, I mean, this guy,
Well, coming from him especially.
all
Yeah.
across, yeah, all across the world. And I'm a firm believer. I don't care who you vote for. I just care about how you act.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
we can get into like how certain people are better for business and X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, I just was like, whoa. And so I don't know. Maybe years down the road from now, maybe there's a lot of truth to that. But nonetheless, I think there's just too much good behind purple not to do it. Not to mention, purple means royalty,
Yep.
clarity, wealth, all those kind of things that we all strive for.
I love that so
So
much, and I think you're right in the comment where you said when you are the brand that is the brand, right? And when you become known for something, I mean you're silly not to embrace it, right? It's like our company started out orange, but I mean I could have certainly done anything, but it's like wait a minute, I just wear orange all the time, and people have associated that with me. So it's like, I guess we're going to continue that. And like to your point with TCU being purple, you can find orange in anything. Like orange is you can find it anywhere. But maybe there's a whole conversation here just about branding, just about how important branding is. Because what I tell people, so for me it's orange, right? For you it's purple, and I bet you probably get the same comments when you wear something other than purple. People are kind of like, everything all right? Oh, gray. That's interesting. Never seen you in gray before. It almost feels weird. And I tell people, I was like, well, I'm undercover. Like, that's the thing. It's like, if I'm not wearing orange, nobody knows who I am. So, anyway.
Well, it's funny. So everybody was that came in, we lended out a bunch of our trucks or F-150s that are all wrapped head to toe purple. And everyone's like, they saw us, and I was like, yeah, they did. And so whether I wanted to be incognito this week, there was a lot more trucks on the road, and it was super cool, man. The event was awesome. I know that's not why we're here today, but I just to kind of recap that event.
Yeah, let's talk about it for a minute, because from an outside perspective, like, I was following everyone's stories that were there. It's from everything I've seen, it was an incredible event.
Thank you. Yeah. So, I absolutely can't do these things without either people paying their way to get there or having, partners, vendor sponsors, stuff like that. So, had great support from a lot of people. I definitely encourage y'all, if you know who those people are, to go support them where you can, because none of them wanted a direct ROI. They just wanted to continue to strengthen the community of fencers and really business men and women. But the first 2 days was our annual planning. It's unrealistic for me to fly all across the country and meet with every single individual team. And I do believe in collaboration. I think that you can have too much collaboration when you're working in individual teams, or sometimes envy or things like that set in. But once a year, great collaboration. And to bring in 30 or 40 people, you need more people to help manage the forum process. And so Matt Warner and Tony Thornton were there the entire time. Phenomenal. It really made a difference. Of course, Michael, one of our coaches. So we had 4 people, so we could kind of divide out the group per se. But then we had a lot of the vendors too that it might be experiencing the same thing. So they're listening to what we're listening to, and they're growing. And by the way, all the vendors were invited and came to Stephen Covey, and the whole talk on trust. They were like, I could take this back to my organization, but most importantly, I could take it back from me. And it was so cool because there's a lot of distrust in vendor or partner relationships, and if people say, well, man, I just wish the other guy that doesn't trust me or I don't trust him were in this conversation. I said, well, first, you can extend trust. You have control over that. But 2, are you willing to be a trustworthy person yourself? Like you want somebody else to be trustworthy, but like, what about you? And then can you extend it? And so it was really cool to hear that say at the end of the day, trust is all about first looking in the mirror, self-awareness, stuff like that. And so that presentation, we had about 50 people. And so if anybody purchases from any of the vendors that are in there, I can guarantee you'll see a little bit different communication style because of the practice. But yeah, so Monday and Tuesday we worked on our annual planning, and there was some really great stuff there. And then after Stephen Covey, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we did an outdoor workshop. 2024 was not necessarily a great year for everybody, so it gets you looking under rocks and seeing if maybe, hey, should we start a new division, or should we add more service lines? Whether it be fence or patio or netting or whatever it is. And so we spent 2.5 days talking about all things outdoor living. And so for all the people that do commercial, they're like, I don't think we're going to do patios. Well, we're just using that to discuss it. But when you get into a commercial application, you have stone columns, you have gazebo. I mean, if you're pulling the plans up and you feel like that's your target market and you like the client that you're working for, why aren't you bidding the dog parks, the sitting benches, the trash cans, all those things? And so it was great, man. It was great. And I kind of wrap up like that whole thing. The way that it worked was Michael presented on the outdoor workshop, and then I was able to work with teams individually. So there may have been two or three people from each company there. And maybe, the founder, the owner, or maybe the admin stepped out and said, hey, I want to work with you and Job Nimbus to better automate my system. Or, hey, I want to chase down Matt and talk about some commercial strategy. So it was really neat that we had little breakout sessions that were unplanned, and man, it was great. It was really cool.
Well, congratulations, because everything I've seen,
Thank
it
you.
looked incredible. And to have Steven there in person giving his talk, I mean, that was crazy to see, like from an outside perspective. I can't imagine what it was like being in the room. It had to be just absolutely
Man,
electric.
man, it was. So I said, "Hey, Stephen, where are you going afterwards?" And he said, "I'm going to Florida. I'm going to be working with the school board. We have to get the seven behaviors, which is the book his dad wrote, into schools. Like, if we could learn what it looks like to be a leader earlier on, then it's not as hard to relearn behaviors,
Yeah.
right, or habits." And one of the gentlemen, Wiley with Apex, came and grabbed me that evening and said, "Hey, Robert, in middle school, sixth and seventh grade, we had an entire semester, both sixth and seventh, learning the seven behaviors." And I was like, how? 20 years ago, we were doing this. And we've gotten
Yeah.
so far away from this.
Yeah.
And Maxwell does some other stuff with the school district. So it's just really incredible to see some of these leaders that believe more in leadership and credibility and authenticity, trying to get their foothold in schools. Because I don't know if anyone's ever done the research on why we were in such a control command state in schools, but back in the Industrial Revolution, Rockefeller actually he was part of setting up the school system to a very structured environment. So that way we could produce factory workers because there was a huge shortage of it. The problem is we never evolved from there. So, we created this command, control, comply mentality, and I'm not speaking on every school in every state or city, but
Sure.
we've got to introduce leadership into schools, and I think it'd be interesting to see it at the higher level, high school or college. But if we could start it at such a smaller age, I mean, we know it, like, we're teaching Spanish now in first, second grade, like, because they can learn it and adapt better. So what if we could start talking about simple leadership skills earlier on? So I'm
Hmm.
really excited to hear that that's what he's doing.
That's very exciting. I mean, as a guy with young kids, I mean, you like to hear that message early on, especially with leadership, because I mean, leadership is a skill you can take wherever you go in life, right? Like even
Yeah.
if it's not in business, even if it's whatever, you can take that skill. I mean, just and apply it to your personal life and be successful. I love
Oh,
to hear
for
that. I
sure.
absolutely do. Now, so
And
we're talking about events that we had recently. You and I the last time we were together was at Tony's event here in Branson, down the road in Branson. Incredible event as well, tons of speakers. But what I wanted to talk to you about today was you gave a presentation that I brought back to my team, and I was telling them kind of, hey, this is sat on my heart. This is something that it resonated with me at this time in our business. I think this I want to share with our team the message. And I said, hey, that 2025 is our year for camping. And I kind of explained to them the first kind of stage of what that means, or the high level of what that means. But then I got to thinking about it. I was like, I might not be bringing the message back exactly correct, because I've slept in between hearing the message and bringing the message. So I might have lost a few things. So really the reason I asked you on is to clarify maybe a little bit for me, but then also bring the message to folks that weren't able to come to Tony's event, because I think it's a message that a lot of people need to hear. And I'll set it up a little bit in that a lot of times all we hear is growth, right? Push, push, push for growth, grow, grow, grow. And your message, at least what I heard in your message, what resonated with me was that maybe growth for the sake of growth isn't great. Maybe sometimes we need to pause and kind of regroup and see where we've come from and where we're going. That's that sort of message.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, let me echo just a few things. So, going back to Covey for a second, somebody said, "Hey, how do we get all this information?" I said, "Well, start with the book. The books that will get you at least there, right?" And so, talking about the hour, right, that you and I had together, like, you can't expect to have done it great. And you, as a leader, realize you need to probably circle back, follow up, and continue to hear the message, right? And so, I think too many people think that they've heard it once, they've got it perfected, or they heard it for an hour and then they don't dive into the research, right? And so that that's why I think why these presenters write books is so it gives you a roadmap. Same thing with Tony, right? Like, if you hear Tony, and like you said, you slept since then, you might have missed certain pieces, but if you pick up the book, he'll get you a lot closer without you, Joe, having to carry that weight. And then the last thing on that too is, I know that our industry, any industry, is covered with a lot of events, and there are days that I wish that we could just have one or two, but there are also days that I think, gosh, if we only had one or two, what if you missed it? Things come up, whether it be travel conditions, or we've got some great people that couldn't come because they're expecting. And so while there are a lot of events, just try and make it to the ones that are most comfortable where you can literally lean in. But going to the campsite presentation, so we did a presentation on campsites, and some of y'all have heard me talk about it before, but knowing when to camp and knowing when to move on. And how I landed on campsites was, campsites are not forever. Maybe 14 to 21 days before you either have to move locations, whether it just be in the park or go back and make some sort of additional payment or something like that. But you can't just go to a national park and stay there forever. And this is kind of build the framework. If you think about it, maybe we're just talking about a journey on a mountain, right? Well, base camp, everyone's in the parking lot, and there's tons of people, whether they're leaving or coming, but there's more commotion. And maybe the first easier campsite, there's even more people because it's pretty easy to stay there for a while. And then the further you go, the less people there are, or the further you go, the more curious you get about going off on your own path and creating your own campsite. And to continue kind of add to this framework, there's less information out there on what to do further you go because less people have traveled. But if you're in the business of selling books or connecting with people, you would think that you'd want to probably write books or write speeches that would resonate with base camp because you have a larger audience and make a potentially larger impact. And so when people feel very lost or confused or want to find info about, let's just use $8 to $10 million, there's going to be a lot less info there. So you're going to have to be more intentional in where you look. I can almost tell you that the information you're going to get is probably through more of a relationship or a network that you have, because you can't just how to do a P&L. It's the same whether it be, $0 or 30 or 40 million. I understand it would get somewhat sophisticated, but you've probably read that book, right? But, as you get further and further along, you have to start looking for rocks like trust. I mean, who would have ever thought, maybe $500,000 in revenue? Trust probably is important, but it's probably not as important as sales. I heard Cannon and Alex talking yesterday. Got to get the phone ring, got to get sales before anything else. Totally get that. But 8 to 10 or 20 million, all of a sudden sales are a subcategory of everything else. And so the whole idea of the campsites is you're going along and then you have rest points. And I saw it this morning. Some people are forced into rest. So fishermen, they go out and the storm hits and they come back and they mend their nets while they're resting, even with us, with the snow we were talking about, we were forced into rest. Now that was a short break, but nonetheless, we were forced into rest. And so before this show, we were talking about what do you do with rest? That's when you rebuild trust because you might have broke it. Sometimes in a leadership style, you have to just dictate where we're going because you know that the team doesn't have the competency yet, or maybe you identified, hey, my vision wasn't clear enough. I just need to step in and make some clear decisions, but I'm going to rebuild trust. It's where you repack your bag. And so large scale, the Pacific Trail, my friend walked the Pacific Trail. Well, if you start in Mexico and end up in Canada and it takes 6 months, you're going to go through different weather patterns. And so you don't need snowshoes in Mexico, and it would be unrealistic to carry all of that. So you have to gain and shed certain things. And even if you think about a hike, if you grab something and you're done with it, you put it at the bottom of your pack. And so you just repack your bag. But then also the campsite, what really resonated with me, that's typically where the best fun conversations happen are around campfires. And talking about Tony's event in Oklahoma the year before Branson, there was a lot of great conversations around the campfire. And so that's kind of what got me on this, is that's where you celebrate your wins, you laugh off your losses. And by the way, if you have losses and they're learning experiences, they're only learning if you reflect on them. If you don't ever reflect on them, then it's not a learning experience. And here's a quick tactical nugget. We realized that we spend a ton of time preparing for the job, handing the job off from sales to ops, procurement. We don't spend a whole lot of time, at least for us, decompressing or debriefing the job. Hey, what went right? What went wrong? So we're never really learning nearly as much. And so we're going to actually put an emphasis on the debrief and less
Yeah.
on the startup, because that's where the most excitement is. And so, yeah, that's the whole concept of it. And I can tell you this, Joe. At the Tony conference, I learned that there's some people I'd probably be willing to go to different campsites with, figuratively. If some people are better campers than others,
Sure.
but
Sure.
also in business, like, hey, I need to go here in that campsite someone's already been to before, so I need to be mentored by them. While I still appreciate the person that got me here, I need to change trajectory. So yeah, that's kind of the
Yeah.
framework of all of that.
Yeah, and just the way, everyone's minds work differently, right? And how you kind of picture the analogies. In my mind, the analogy kind of I formed was if we're climbing a summit, right? So Mount Everest, right, has multiple stopping points along the way. To your point, base camp, and really what you're focusing on is what I need to get to the next level. Nobody sits at base camp and says, I'm going to hit the top. Like, we're not stopping until we get there. It's unrealistic and it won't happen, right? It's just, and if you always ever just say, well, I just need to continue climbing up, well, sometimes up isn't always the right choice, right? Like sometimes you get to a base camp, it's like, guys, up only leads us to danger, and there's a crevice over there that we can't pass, so we actually need to move a little bit laterally here to get to a next camp to then focus. And I think that's why your analogy of camping is important, because if we're always ever just climbing up, if we're always ever just growing for the sake of growth and everything is always up, well, sometimes there's pitfalls along the way, right? And to your point of, hey, wanting to get to different campsites with guys that are there, on these journeys, there's always a guide, at least one guide. And a lot of times on these, there's multiple guides for the trip, right? Like, hey, this guy is great at traversing ice. He's our ice guide. So he's going to make sure that we've got the right gear, that we've got the right plan, that we keep the correct pace, because pacing is also important, right? That we're not trying to set the record on how fast we get there, because often you won't get there, right? You'll tire, and then if we're talking about Mount Everest, if you start getting tired at the wrong spot, you're done too. Right? At some points you have to keep moving, but at some points you got to keep pace. But you have different guides for different part of the journeys too.
Yeah, no, and great point. Sometimes you have to move. Even if you see the campsite you plan for and you're like, hey, we plan to stop there, sometimes you have to keep moving because a storm might blow in or something like that, right? So you have to just move in. But that's where you need to inspire your team. If you controlled and commanded them and said, hey, we're going to move forward because I said so, people will comply because they see the storm coming in, but they're not going to be nearly as inspired to carry their bag. And so when we're talking about growth, if somebody says, hey, Robert, like, I want to grow, and one of the reasons I became a coach is, great, in what? Right? Like, are you wanting to grow in your leadership? You want to grow your trust? You want to grow your accountability? And almost always it's revenue, infrastructure, whatever it is. So to be clear, when we're talking about growing specifically right now, we're probably talking about economics, right? So your scalability of your business. But at camp is typically where you work on the stuff under the hood. You're building trust, going back to conversations that you didn't have unfiltered. So you didn't even you avoided conflict by not having that conversation. And by the way, sometimes it's okay to pause conflict and go back to it later, or to identify, hey, this person wasn't totally bought in. Not that we had a unanimous vote, but we had everybody bought in because everybody was heard. So like when we're at a campsite and say, hey, there's 5 or 10 people, and we're talking and say, hey, do y'all want to go move on? And everyone voices why or why not. That's all most people need for us to either move on or go back. They just need to be heard and valued and things of that nature. And so you could grow so much in so many other areas besides just revenue or whatever else, build a stronger infrastructure. Tony's book, I see he's on here. Tony's book has 7, now 8 stages. And he has this really cool secret 9. So I'll let him tell you about it. Go camp on one of those stages, or there's so many other models out there. You could camp like Patrick Lencioni. the triangle, there's trust and there's conflict, there's commitment, accountability, and results. Well, you might want to camp on one of those and get really good at accountability before we go to results. Or John Maxwell, this is one of my favorites, right? So there's different peaks, and he actually has a cool diagram that's literally a mountain that says people follow you because they have to, right? That's at base camp, right? And then people follow you because they want to. That's the next campsite. Like, but you can't just be, okay, cool, now you want to, I'm going to keep moving on. Then you have to go prove yourself, and people follow you because of what you've done for the organization, right?
Sure.
And it just keeps going on. And says, people follow you because of what you do for them, And then the last one is people follow you because of who you are as a legacy, right? And you can't just, like you said, hey, I just want to do the right thing and prove it. No, you can't prove it in a night that you're a good
Right.
steward to humanity. That's over a long period of time. And so, like, if you don't have a lot of wins under your belt right now, then you need to camp there and show your team that people can follow you because of the results that you can produce. And maybe you're not the one physically producing it, or but somebody in the organization, your plan or your vision has to be relevant. And so, anyways, there's just so many different ideas. Or if you look at Ramsey, I'm not as big of a Ramsey follower as some of the other ones, but he has the different stages, the Trailblazer, the Pathfinder, and those are different campsites. And then the last one, Maxwell has 4 reasons for change. So, like, if you look at the 4 campsites, it hurts enough you have to. Seen enough you're inspired to. Those are different campsites. Hey, I've been inspired. I'm moving on from this campsite. Or you've learned enough you can, or you've earned enough you can, and I've shortened it just to move on from this, but
Sure.
those are different campsites. So where I'm at, I was stuck at a campsite. I was inspired enough, got there. It doesn't really hurt as much anymore. And sometimes it does. I've learned constant learning, but what I was inspired when I met Maxwell the most recent time is he said, Robert, everybody knows when they were going to make $1 million, but nobody knows when they're going to give away $1 million. That's an abundance mindset. And I've made enough money to start thinking that way. And so I'm not going to move on, or I'm going to move on, and I'm not going to get to the next campsite until I figure out how to start giving more. And so the campsites can be so different to whatever you want to apply it to. So
Sure.
anyway,
Well,
sorry, I had to go on I wish I had all my slides.
No.
I could show people the different, I mean, everything is a campsite. Everything
Yeah.
is a campsite if you break it down that way.
Well, right, because
So,
campsite's just an analogy to pressing pause for a minute, right? To regrouping, or maybe it isn't pressing pause. Maybe it's just slowing the pace, right? To say, hey guys, for us, I mean, I think for a lot of contractors out there, we've had 4 or 5 years, arguably probably longer than that, of great economy. Now, COVID was a bump in the road there for a second, and then the economy, at least our section of the economy, grew crazy. So the reason your talk resonated to me was I've kind of had this thought. I was like, we've been growing now for a period of years. We ought to stop and kind of reevaluate, see what standard procedures we've broken, right? Or which ones haven't grown with us. Because there's several that I can think of to where we said, okay, that did apply before, it doesn't apply now. And so we're moving forward. And for right now, here's how we're going to do it. We ought to solidify that. Right. There is I can't go touch that standard procedure to say, hey, here are the steps. I just say I've communicated them, but we haven't actually put them on paper. I think putting them on paper is important for a few reasons. One, it really makes you think about it, right? If I'm going to commit this to paper and I'm going to hand this to somebody, I had better make sure it's 100% right, or at least as close to 100% as we can get. If you're just communicating it, you're giving yourself wiggle room to say, okay, well, what I meant was, or what I should have said was, but when you put it on paper, it had better be right. It's there in black and white. For us, that's our base camp, right? And also, when we're growing, we've had tremendous growth top line, but our bottom line hasn't scaled with the top line, right? So we've gotten a little bit bloated somewhere between gross profit and net profit. There's a little too much bloat in there, which can happen. And as long as you recognize it, I think it's okay. I mean, it's not like there's still enough at the bottom to keep everybody paid and keep everybody happy, but There could be more, to your point, so that we can give away more, right? So let's spend a period of time and figure out, let's go through the P&L and figure out what's in there that maybe shouldn't be there. Maybe I know for a fact there's some software in there that we've picked up along the way that we don't really use anymore, but we still keep it around because sometimes we use it. We probably ought to think about that, right? And anyone that's gone through a period of growth probably has something like that. So that's another area that when we're in our campsite, and for us, the year 2025 is going to be our campsite to say, hey, all right, let's talk about where we're going, right? And that can be what services we're offering. That can be maybe how we're offering those services, but then also, like you said, let's repack our bag. Let's pull everything out and say, what's in this P&L? All right, well, we don't need the shorts anymore, right? We're getting a little too far north for the shorts. Let's pitch them out. We don't need the tennis shoes. Let's pitch those things out. We don't need the sunscreen. Let's pitch that. But let's also pick up a couple extra things, right? So let's trade the shorts for pants. Let's trade the tennis shoes for boots, whatever the analogy. But then let's repack it. Right, let's make sure we're not carrying around a lot of extra weight here, and then get really focused on and probably find a guide to say, hey, I think we're going this way, but I bet we could find somebody that's been there before. To your point of, hey, they've been to that next campsite. Let's figure out how to get to that next one. I think everyone could probably benefit at least from having that thought, like to sit down over a long weekend and really think about and being honest with themselves about their business. And hey, does this need to be a growth year? Should it be a growth year, or should it be let's reorganize, let's camp for a little bit before we continue the next leg of the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned guide, and if my eyes glanced over, Michael Reed and I. This is a passionate topic of ours, and if y'all don't know Mike Reed, he is unbelievably schooled, and he backs a lot of what he does up through true, I don't want to say facts, but because I mean it is, but through fundamentals that have been proven for 80 years. One of the reasons why some of these books are relevant today is because it's built on foundations and fundamentals that will never, go away. And so, the idea of the Sherpa, people, people follow Sherpas because they're the experts, right? And he give credit to words too. He's talking about the Sherpa, right? So like for me, I'm purple coaching. I'm your Sherpa. But my job is to get you to become the expert in business or leadership or whatever it is. And sometimes I need you at a campsite for us to be focusing on you instead of focusing on the external, right? It's funny when it snows outside, you put on a jacket. It doesn't change the environment on the outside. It changes the environment on the inside. And like, I want people to really think about that. Like, you don't solve the snowing problem by putting on a jacket. You solve your problem on the inside. And so, if you Google how many coaches Michael Jordan had or Tiger Woods, they had so many different either coaches. And this isn't a plug for me, but it's the important part of to know before you go journey to the next journey. If you don't have some sort of mentor or somebody that has gone there, and it doesn't necessarily mean in fencing. Like, you don't have to be like, hey, to get to 5 million, I got to go call somebody else. But it could be in leadership styles, or like, hey, the habits you had at base camp will not be the same habits that get you to the top. Like for anybody who isn't big into reading or listening, I can tell you, one of my favorite things is instead, I don't really like saying, hey, Joe, how's your weekend? I like saying, hey, Joe, what book are you reading? Somewhere along the way, you'll tell me how your weekend went.
Sure.
Oh man, I'm not reading a book. Yeah, I'm not reading a book right now, and then it makes you that, or whatever. So I asked Stephen Covey. Said Stephen, as soon as I shook his hand, I did ask him, hey, how's your flight? Thanks for coming. Say, hey, what book are you reading? And he gave me 2 books I've never even heard of before, and like, I thought I knew every book there was, and so he gave me 2 books, and I downloaded them, and I'm like, heck yeah. So, by the way, ask really intentional questions at campsite. So here's another one that I asked Stephen, because I had him. I got to pick him up, drop him off. He didn't want a car. He wanted to connect. It was just amazing. And I could have asked, hey man, how do I scale purple coaching, or how do I double my trust in Magnolia, or whatever? And I said, hey, how did you and your dad do it? Y'all are both fathers. Just tell me how that went. Stephen Covey is a father of 5. If you didn't know this, his son actually plays for the Philadelphia Eagles. Pretty amazing.
Oh, wow.
And then Stephen Covey, his dad, had 9 kids, and he was world renowned. And so he said, well, number one, I take my kids, or I take, or my dad took kids wherever. Now, if you have 9 kids or 5 kids, you maybe have to pick and choose. So if y'all see me, I'm always bringing my son to any event that's appropriate. If you were at midyear, you saw that my son was reading Traction because that's all he had. And then if you saw on some pictures, we were doing 3-minute sales presentations.
Yes.
And my son was in the room, and he ended up giving a presentation that absolutely stole the room. And it was a sales pitch on why to use purple coaching. It was just unbelievable. So, anyways, so that was it. But what he said was, he said, the reason why my dad was so great was because he was great on stage, but he was even better off stage. But the gap between on stage and off stage was so tight that you knew who he was and what he stood for. And I'm curious if we don't stay at a campsite until we make sure that our gap gets a little bit tighter, because who we are on stage in our businesses and who we are off stage, we need to determine how far, and you'll get far away. That's inevitable. But at campsites, you bring them back together. Say, I kind of was getting away from my values there for a second. It's inevitable. We're human.
Sure. Yeah.
And so on his way out, he shook my hand. He said, Robert, I want to make sure you know, 80% of the time. He said, my dad was not perfect. I'm not perfect. But the important part was to always practice being as close as you are in person and behind the doors. And so anyways, the reason why I bring some of that stuff up and just the different campsites is nobody can help you go to the next stage if you're not transparent and you don't trust giving them where you're at. But you also need to make sure that you're evaluating where you are. And sometimes it's hard to evaluate yourself. So having like a Sherpa evaluate you, right? So like I can guarantee you if I went up to the Sherpa right now and was like, hey, I think I'm ready to go, he would give me a true evaluation of where I'm at and what I need to do to prepare, and then wouldn't want to go up there with me. So anyways, I'm just, throwing some stuff out there because, of course I'm on a high with the Covey thing, but at the end of the day, like, it's exactly like, it's so critical that if you don't trust yourself, you're not going to be able to move on. You can move on from campsite, but those results are not sustainable. And I loved what Cannon and Alex said, that their acronym for easy, but one of them was sustainable. And so you can produce exceptional results, but for how long? And I think sustainable is such a critical word that you don't get to burnout. And my brother's doing a presentation on burnout. Because once you burn out, then, oh man, the results are substantially under impressive, and it's a lot harder to get back. And so not being in a rush, in a rush. And Joe, I've seen some of your numbers because we did something earlier. You're growing, but like you said, you can grow profits and not grow revenue, and that doesn't hurt nearly as bad as growing revenue. Growing revenue is substantially more painful for the organization than growing profits. And you don't grow profits by beating up partners and vendors, by the way, y'all. Their price is their price. You need to be a good steward of your money. But this isn't a call your vendors and get a 10% discount. This is call your vendors, share your vision. And once your vendors know your vision, then they know what tools that they can provide you. So anyways, I'm on a killer cool high right now, man.
Well, let's talk about that. So I was listening to the podcast you did with Dan Wheeler. If you guys aren't listening to the Fence Industry podcast, you need to, where you had talked about a vendor relationship, right? To say, hey, in the example that you were talking about was, we've got a guy where he's making this into job, like we're ordering a truckload, then he's breaking it into job quantities or job size quantities, job lot quantities. What if we worked with our vendor to see, can they do that on their end and deliver it as job lot quantities? Now, we're going to pay a little bit more for it, but that little more for it is still less than paying somebody to do that on our end. And I think that's a good example of what you're just saying. You didn't call the vendor up to beat them up on pricing to say, hey, I've got to save X percent or whatever the number is. You said, okay, well, let's think about this. Well, if we cut this position, if we ask them to maybe change their process for us a little bit, realize that it might cost a little bit more, but ultimately it will save us. In the long run, you guys came out ahead on that. Both of you did, both you and the vendor.
Yeah. And going back to the campsites, those ideas don't come up when you're tromping through the snow on the 11th hour of your hike. Those ideas typically happen at a campsite or something. So, for scaling businesses or growing business, campsites might come every other day. For
Sure.
established businesses like me and you, they might be coming every quarter, every year.
Yeah.
There's a lot of research behind that. If you want to double your revenue, you need to treat your annual meetings as quarterly. Think about that. So if you're
Interesting.
not even having quarterly meetings or annual meetings, you're not going to be able to scale like that. So we're trying to we try and grow between 10 and 20% every year. That's a pretty, and last year we actually lost a little bit of money. We can go into that later, but I guess we forgot one of our packs at one of our other camps, so I was waiting to go get it real quick. But uh it's just really interesting to think about all of that. And if you want to double your revenue in 2025, then you better have a whole lot of campsites along the way, like real quick
Yeah.
ones. Are we good? You good? Checking with vendors, whatever else. And you're like, oh, I don't have time for that. Then you don't have time to grow. You don't have time to go.
Well,
Think
there's
about that.
also a thought of if you don't make time, time will be made for you also. Right?
Oh, yeah,
You had better
for
make time
sure.
on your schedule because it'll happen one way or the other. And you might not like it when it gets made for you situation.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
We're all business owners. And everyone's like, I don't like being told what to do. Then prioritize your priorities or they'll prioritize themselves. Yeah, very, very
yeah.
good point there. And so, if
Yeah.
anybody
In this
struggles with
analogy,
meeting, yeah, what's
oh,
that?
sorry, I completely interrupted you. One of these days, I'll act like a real host. I promise. Um, I was just going to say, in this analogy of climbing to the peak or climbing a mountain, you've got base camps, but also the team also catches their breath occasionally, right? So we'll take a break for drinks, energy bars, whatever, to continue on to catch our breath or whatever, or maybe change pace. I think that's probably what you're talking about when you're talking about quarterly meetings, right? Like, listen, we're not going to have a week long breakout session on, hey, here's every part of the business. We're going to have a 1 day, hey, like you said, you good, we're good. Or, hey, this is something that's been on my mind the last couple of weeks. Let's sit and talk about it as we kind of readjust, realign to wherever our next base camp is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I was thinking for the fitness guys, fitness is now a new thing, fence and fitness, right? There's rest days, and I mean, Gas could speak on all that, but I mean, you can't work out for 24 hours straight and see any kind of improvement or results, but you can work out for 24 days, 1 hour, and see massive results. But I can tell you that not every day is going to be chest day. You switch around muscles, you give them a break. And so maybe you're just at a campsite on your chest for 3 days or whatever and give it rest. So there's just so many different ways to make this concept so common sense and practical. And you mentioned employees, and I think that when my brother's presentation on burnout that he does at FinStech, I think it's super amazing if y'all could all go, because a lot of us owners have a poor me a syndrome, and not like, and not to call us out like that, but like we think we're the only ones who get burnt out. Our
Yeah.
employees can get burnt out too for two different reasons. One, they don't want this exact same things we want. Eventually, we'll probably outgrow that, outgrow them. Or two, they're so bought in, they're running as hard as we're running. And I was talking to Matt Warner, and he's like, "Oh man, my people are so amazingly obsessed with where we're going. I need to make sure they don't burn out because I've burnt out before, and I want to make sure they
Yeah.
don't burn out." And so
Yeah.
this is not a knock on owners. Owners can easily get burnt out, and probably more frequently. One, we ask for it, and two, we can see further around the corner, so we can pull ourselves out of it maybe a little bit quicker. But employees burn out constantly too, and so you've got to
Yeah.
give rest where rest is due. And since you're the leader and you know the way, show the way, and go the way, to Maxwell, if you know what burnout and the symptoms of burnout are, you need to provide those breaks and pit stops before somebody asks for it. And I love what the Ritz
Yeah.
Carlton does. They don't ask if they can take your bag, they just take your bag, because most humans don't actually like a lot of help. Hey, can I take your
No,
bag? I bet you 50% of the people say, no, I got it.
I got it.
But
Yep.
if you just grab the bag and go, and so, hey, do you want to take a break? You want to take off this Friday? Nah, I got it. I'm bought in. Hey, I like you so much. You should take a break. We'll be fine on Monday. Just give
Yeah.
them that. And so, anyways, Michael does an incredible presentation on burnout, but he can speak to it a
Nice.
little bit more clear because he is a recovering burnout I guess he's in recovery of burnout. I guess I don't know what that terminology would be, but
Sure.
um, it's definitely a pretty amazing speech and really wraps all the campsites up. You got to take some breaks, and
Yeah.
so where we're at with Magnolia, John Maxwell gifted me that $1 million to $1 million mind shift or paradigm change, and so we're growing. Um, but we have some groundwork to make up, and so we put together a 3-year plan to grow. So we'll get like we wanted to be at 12 million in 3 years, and so let me see if I can spell this out. The first year and a half, we're going to grow substantially slower, so we're going to have to end up putting a whole lot more growth in on the back end of our goal instead of just equally dividing it out. Because, like to you said, Joe, we need to clean up our SOP. We got to get our house in order. And
Yeah.
so everyone's like, "Whew, Robert, $8 million goal. That's fair." I didn't know how we were going to get to 12, and I said, "Yeah, but next year we're going to have to grow at about 30%. So I want to build the trust and the accountability right now, so then we can actually scale." And so we're actually growing faster. It just doesn't look that way because we first are going to put our house in order. So
Well, and one thing we had talked about actually, I think we talked about this before we went live was compounding results, right? So
mhm.
small changes, but changes that are made regularly and they compound on each other. I think that's what you're talking about is compound growth as well. Hey, we're not going to grow very much in the beginning, at least it doesn't seem like it. But once we start stacking these wins, all of a sudden, that's going to supercharge us at the end of this journey because all those results have compounded on each other. Now we can't help but to grow, another X percent or
Yeah.
another X millions of dollars. Is we've just had all these successive wins that's just a given at that point.
Yeah, absolutely, 110%. Purple Coaching, I've been posting a lot of stuff recently on compounded efforts and actions and what that yield is. And then the one I just posted today was you plant a seed, you don't bear fruit the same day. And every year over year, that tree or that plant generally produces more and more fruit as it continues to get more and more established in the root system, acclimates to the environment. And so I really want people to think, are you at a campsite or not? And in fairness too, have you been at your campsite too long? They're not there forever.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
could go back. You could go back to base camp. And if you need to, and sometimes people need to, but I can tell you, you'll be back in the same campsite you were. And so it'd just be easier to get the courage or get the confidence to move forward. And Matt Warner said, hey, some people need to borrow some confidence or courage. And so that's what I do as a coach, or that's what you do, Joe, on these podcasts, is we're lending out confidence or courage. Like you want it, we'll
I
give
love
you
that
some.
thought.
Yeah, and just let me give you a little. You don't have to give it back. You'll use it up. I got more, but eventually you have to create your own. I just want to
Yeah.
get you started because things in motion stay in motion. So don't get stuck at the campsite either.
I love that
And
too. Yeah,
so
you need to
yeah, man,
recognize when you need it, but you also need to recognize when it's time to get moving too.
yeah. Dang it,
I
man.
love
Maybe
that.
I should. I'm doing a burn the boat presentation at FinStech.
Yeah.
And burning the boats essentially is getting out of that campsite. Like we're moving forward, but
Yeah.
maybe I need to do I don't know. Maybe they'll let me do another presentation on campsites, sneak one in. Maybe somebody will cancel their presentation, but
Yeah, do like a
I'm
part
really,
one and a part two of the talk.
yeah, yeah, I really believe in this campsite framework, and I believe that there's a lot of different great leaders, the Maxwells and the Ramseys and the Coveys that have built this idea of campsites. They just didn't make it so common sense, campsites.
Yeah.
We can all resonate with that. So I'm glad
Bingo.
we had a chance to talk about this, man, and I hope we provided a little bit more clarity to deliver it to the team. But compounding results, I mean, part of campsites is growing your leadership. Well, at FinStech, I'm doing a leadership conference from 8 to 5 through the AFA. We built this incredible program out, me and John McCoy, Nick Reich, Sean, and with Seegers, and then Rice with AFA, Chris Rice, not AFA, sorry, Maristar. And so we've got some really heavy hitters that built this thing out that all across the country. And so there's just so many different ways to identify where your campsite is. And I think most people in our industry are great at fencing. I think we can agree on that. So now it's time to start spending some energy and time working on your leadership ability and building trust and accountability. And by the way, accountability can be a positive and a negative. I'm going to hold you accountable for your amazing results. I'm going to praise you, and I'm going to hold myself accountable. And I'm going to put my money where my mouth is, and I'm going to reward you for that. And then vice versa. And then 360 feedback, allowing people to provide accountability to the leaders as well. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I see Mike Reed wrote.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to make the switch between purple and
And orange.
orange. Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it.
I seen Sean King. He got himself a blue sombrero at in Fort Worth, and so
I love that.
yeah. So he went live and he had a blue cow. He's bought into. So I wonder what blue, purple, and orange. That probably just becomes really messy color, like a maroon.
algorithm.
But yeah.
Well, hey,
Anyways,
let's do this. I want to talk about FinTech too. I don't want to bookend this too shortly or too quickly, but to follow up on this, if people would want to listen to a talk similar to this, you're giving a talk at FinTech, and so I want that to be kind of the end of our conversation. But before we do that, let's go check in with the chat. It's been going for a while, and I haven't checked in on them in a while. So actually, we haven't checked in on them at all, and I apologize, chat. We'll scroll back up to the top. Front Rock Fences. Good morning, Joe and Robert. I love what you're doing with Purple Coaching. Appreciate that.
my man.
That. He's down in Florida right now. He's soaking up the sunshine.
Is he?
Yep. Jordan Murray. Hello. Eric just said, I love listening to you guys because you built a fence and have helped me on my 3-rail wood fence. They're destroyed after Hurricane Beryl. There you go.
Oh, man.
Eric had some questions on fencing. If you want to reach out to me directly, I'd be more than happy to help you if you're still here. This was like back at the beginning of the show. Josh Rand agreed. Love the purple story. I'm glad I asked you because I don't know that I've ever actually heard the purple story. And this is a whole conversation in and of itself, but knowing your why, like knowing the why. And when I'm talking to people about like social media, about presenting themselves on social media, that's the first step, is tell your why. People love to know why you do the thing, right? Like why do we wear orange? Why do we love helping community? Why do we build fence? Telling your why. People love to hear those stories. Anyway, I'm glad I asked you yours. I love that purple story. Michael Reed says 2025 is a great year for growth. Agreed. If you guys watched last week, we had Tony Thornton on, who was giving his kind of like economic analysis of not only 2025 but forward. It sounds like it's going to be an incredible set of years. So I think we all buckle up for it. Now, to the point though, like not everyone go crazy this year. It's not a sprint either; it's a marathon. So let's keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Hey, on that note too, if you didn't have a great 2024, you're going to be tempted to peak at results in 2025, and some of us don't have enough cash to scale, and unfortunately, we might miss this train. But history will repeat itself, and 2025 is going to be great. 2026 should be even better, and so on and so forth. So don't get in a hurry. Make sure that you have enough cash or cash flow. I've got a great talk on cash conversion cycle and making sure your cash conversion cycle is shorter than your cash flow cycle, and I can help people understand that. But if you got out of a slow 2024, you have no business running into 2025 without making sure that your banker knows you need a little extra cash, or making sure that your cash flow is a little bit tighter. Or if you can't get any of those, tightening down your cash conversion cycle. And I can speak to some of that as well.
Well, absolutely. And understanding it's not just 2025, right? So it's also 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Like looking at Tony's analysis, it makes perfect sense to say, hey guys, for the next 5 years, we're in great shape.
Yep.
So, and the market 5 years from now, according to the projections, is supposed to be significantly larger than this year. So also don't be scared to not grow this year, right? Like don't feel like you're missing out, so that you can take advantage 26, 27, 28, because arguably those will be bigger years anyway.
Yep. Perfect.
Eubanks said, it looked awesome. I agree with Robert and Michael involved. I figured it would be. Speaking to your event.
Yeah.
Robert Evers, welcome in. John Walthy, hello. There he is, Mr. Thornton himself. Good morning, Tony. Yeah, buddy out in kind of Central California. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, buddy. How are you? Let's see. Well, yeah. So I've been getting this a lot on my. So I go live on TikTok as well, almost every afternoon, and everyone's talking about this. Like, hey, they're going to need fences in California. They will, like, next year. Like, it's going to be a year, 2 years down the road. Everyone, I understand people that follow storms for immediate needs. Maybe roofing would be an example, but fencing, typically, if the storm's bad enough, fencing's not needed for a while. Like, no one's saying, hey, they got bigger issues on their plates than trying to figure out who's going to fix their fence. But at some point, it's a good point. Well, this is a conversation to be had another time. But there's a bunch of redwood milling getting ready to go on in California because arguably one of the reasons for the wildfires could be that not enough forestry was going on. So, I mean, Robert, you and I are roughly the same age, to where I can remember when we were young, it was people chaining themselves to trees, people blowing up, forestry equipment to try to save the trees. And so they did away with forestry almost altogether as far as redwoods go. So they grew just unrestricted, and they weren't harvesting deadwood. They weren't harvesting any of that. And anyway, so maybe a little too much too late.
Yeah, we can talk about it on another show. Maybe bring in some experts. But there's, at Tony's conference, heard that there's actually more board footage of redwood than there is cedar right now, and so there's going to be maybe a shift back. And you got to be nimble, but that's a whole nother conversation. So,
but that was roughly the same conversation as what. That was the table that was having that conversation, was just about the fact that there was no milling going on forever. And now there's milling coming online, but it's years into the future.
Yeah.
But hopefully it'll take a crack at it. Maybe this accelerates those plans. Who knows? Jared Burns loves the analogies. Good stuff. And I think, Robert, that's why your message resonated with me, is that, like, it was the analogy that made the most sense. I mean, this taking time for yourself and taking time to analyze, like, it's not necessarily a groundbreaking thought, but the analogy makes sense, right? I think that's really, for me, what made me sit and go, you know what, you're right. We've been climbing for too long, and we've been going at a breakneck speed. We need to pause, catch our breath, reevaluate what we're doing. And anyway, the analogy is what sells it for sure. This guy, Nathan Downs, Protecting Your Radius podcast. The base camp analogy is fantastic. Pacing is super important. Absolutely. Benji says, good morning, fellas. Two of my favorite colors, purple and orange. I love it. I love it. So, I don't know if you know Justin Menendez. So, he's in the staining. He's on staining and sealing side. Actually, he's up there kind of by Warner. He's up there in Omaha, or the Omaha area. But right now, he's in Camp Dodge, Iowa, training and learning for the Masters while learning military training. He gets to shoot a bunch of guns up there, and I'm jealous of that. Benji says, buy-in is totally underrated, is vital for sustainable growth and health of any business. I think this was an important thing that you touched on as well, is, you can only command for so long, right? You can only just say, because I said so often, until you actually have to show, and you actually have to have buy-in. And occasionally you let them lead the way, right? To say, hey, I'm going to arm you with some leadership tools. I'm going to hand you the baton for this. I'm going to let you take on a leadership role to help with that buy-in.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Just real quick on that. You need buy-in, but that's not always for you. You need to also buy-in too, and it's not a consensus.
Yeah.
So naturally, you're probably, as a leader, going to have a lot of ideas that you're trying to get buy-in for. But to your point, buy-in will quickly disappear if you don't occasionally buy in on some of the other ideas around you. So I'm asking everybody, and the rhetorical question is, when was the last time you bought in on something you didn't agree with in your organization? And if you can't think of one, either your team isn't making enough decisions, or they've been put in such a tight box that there's nothing spectacular coming out of that box, and you're the one who put them there. So think about that. When was the last time you bought in on a decision that you didn't believe in, but you were going to commit to within your organization? It's a hard one to answer.
That's a tough question. to sit and kind of do some self-analysis on. Interesting.
Yeah.
So Robert says purple and orange makes a shade of brown. I just Googled it. Well, okay, that's fair. Michael Reed says, who would have thought that orange and purple would go together so well? Great conversation. Thank you, Michael. John McLean says, we need to get some green in there too. Fair. Bring on the green. Throckmorton's here. He says, 6 weeks till Fence Tech. It's going to be here before we know it. Don't know if they could fit you on the screen, big dog. I'm not sure. Benji.
Talking about John McClain.
Oh, they're having a conversation with each other. Oh, I got you.
I think so. I'm tracking that.
Say, Benji, I've been going to the gym, man. Like, let's not turn this into that conversation. Yeah. Come on. That's good. We're having to moderate a little bit of the comments in here. Aloha Fence says, learn this weekend that if you're short on taxes, you can take out a loan with the IRS. Not advising, just learned it. Okay. So consult your tax professional on situations like this. Jordan says, how do you find your first coach or mentor? I'll give my thoughts on it, but I'm also Robert. So, and the reason I want to give my thoughts first is because there might be a sense that since you're a coach, like might be still a little bit of bias on that. What I would say, so I know several, right? Obviously Robert, Tony, Sean. There's others, but those are Robert. That's probably like who else is coaching out there right now?
Yeah, I mean those are the three in our known industry, but the guy with the toolbox, the profit toolbox,
that's right,
Dominic.
Dominic.
There's a lot of mentors and coaches that are just a little bit outside of our industry. And then, there's even coaches and mentors. Like I'm a Maxwell leadership coach. So we have several of them. So there's a ton of them, but those three that you named are pretty much the ones in the industry. Yeah.
So my recommendation, Jordan, would be, I'd say interview all, right? Well, actually, I gave this advice when they were talking about websites earlier. Someone asked about websites in one of the Facebook groups. And obviously Benji with Clever Fox came up, .com came up as well. And I was like, listen, these are great guys. And I'll say the same thing about the coaches. All great guys. They can all do great things for your business. But my advice is interview all. Like sit and have a conversation with everybody and say, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's where I'm wanting to go. And just get feedback and see which one you feel like aligns with whatever part of the journey you're on now or wherever you're trying to go. Would that be fair, Robert?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So I can tell you that if you need a true coach or consultant, you need to as clearly able to define what you need or what you want out of it. Or if you don't have clarity, then you even need it more than ever. But Matt Warner did one, and we were all together. Is the first question you can answer to even divide that out is: are you really looking for a friend? Or are you looking for a coach? Identify that first. And just like campsites, if you land on a friend first, you can keep them forever, but eventually you need to move on to coach. Or if you grab the coach, you eventually will need some friends too, because you've got to have a good balance, but you know what I mean by that. So, for example, I needed some friends in the business or in the industry. I've created that, but I went and got a business coach first, but you need both because it's not fulfilling to have one or the other. And so exactly what you said, though, interview them. And I know me and Tony both, we have some prying questions to get you closer to where we think you are. But in simplest form, installation techniques, and I hope I'm not putting anybody in boxes, but installation techniques, creative, innovative products. Sean King's going to do that. He's really big into budgeting and stuff like that, if that's where your passion is. Tony's on call to collect. I freaking love that. Call to collect, a bunch of systems and processes, right? And I'm more on the leadership side of things. So you might have a phenomenal business, believe your SOPs are relatively good, and you can't figure out why people aren't excited about it. And that's, where I fit in. And so me and Tony talked about there are different stages in your business. You might need us for different times or pull us in or out. And so Tony was at our event because there was a lot of need for him in the people I coached. So I identified that, brought him in, fed them what they needed, and so as a good coach too, you're humble enough to bring other experts in as needed. So anyways, exactly that, and that's why y'all do these podcasts. Here's a plug for the podcast. Both Tony and me and Sean, Tony and I do a lot of combined work, so we can speak on those two. I've been on a lot of podcasts. So talking about consistency, go listen to the first one and go listen to my last one.
Yeah.
If my message hasn't changed, then that might tell you what the predictable results are going to look like. If Tony's platform, I mean, he's 7 strategies. He published it in a book. Now he added an 8th one, and it's totally amazing, right? It's because he believes in his strategies and he's bought in. And so think about the predictability of all of that. All the other podcasts and all the other coaches or people outside of the industry, go listen to the first one and the last one. And believe it or not, somebody asked me, how did Purple Coaching start? Besides the push from my family and Apex, I actually did a campsite presentation on Dan Blanc and Shane's podcast years and years ago. It was not nearly as thorough. I've since done a lot more research to support it, kind of talking about the Mike Reed thing. Mike taught me, like, hey, you better do some research to support your fundamentals or your, or else it's going to be irrelevant. And so anyways, yeah, do your research interview, but also do your research. That's why you do these things for us.
Sure.
Sure. And go to the fence techs and stuff like that. So I love it. Josh Rand, he asked, what book are we reading right now? We got to answer this guy real quick.
Yeah. Well,
so
so Robert, well, anyway, what book are you reading? Or what books are you reading?
So back in the day, you would see what was on somebody's CD. So Speed of Trust is up there right now. That's what I was listening to get caught up. But I started Grit and Leaders Eat Last, and both those were good. But let me tell you the book that I just downloaded that Stephen Covey told me, which was. Let me pull it up just real quick because I want to get it right.
Yep.
So I listen to a lot of books over and over. So I want to listen to Getting to Yes and Failing Well. So those are the 2 that I'm going to probably start tomorrow. Getting to Yes and Failing Well. So I know I just listed a bunch because I listen to a lot of books all at the same time. I lose interest, or let me back up. Don't lose interest. In business books, if you listen to the whole thing all the way through, you typically don't start anything. So I learn a little and I go do a little. Yep. And then when I do a little, I realize, hey, I need to go pick up a different book to address what I just learned. And so I'll have 5 or 6 books started because I'll learn a little, do a little, learn a little, do a little. And before I know it, I've learned a lot, done a lot. And Tony and I've very aligned with this, that Tony and I will start a couple books and then we completely go somewhere else. Maybe we realize that, I don't know, maybe it's not business, it's spiritual that we need to be reading next or whatever else. And I'm putting me and him spend a lot of time together. So I'm like talking about Tony a lot, but anyway, so that's the book. So those 2 books are the ones I'm going to be reading next.
I love it. So, and also if people want to know what books you're recommending, there's a place they can go to see what books you're recommending at any given time.
Yeah, www.purplecoaching.com. Brought to you by Clever, or maybe not by Clever Fox, but Clever Fox made my website, and we change out our bookshelf every quarter. We're about to swap it out again, and so we have a bookshelf that you can see what 5 books that I've either read or recommending right now.
I love it. So it's funny you mentioned Traction. So Traction's one of the books I'm going back through now. So I've been through it probably 3 or 4 times, but Traction's certainly a book you could read cover to cover, but you could also pick out bits and pieces, right? So I think maybe it's important to read it cover to cover first, but I always end up going back and kind of referencing on kind of, hey, here's where I think we're at. Here's what did it say? What did I think it said? That sort of thing. So Traction's one that I go back through regularly. I just started going back through it again. But also Mastering the Rockefeller Habits is one that I just wrapped up. And it's a golden oldie. Like this is not a new earth-shattering book. I really liked it. So Rockefeller Habits. So speaking about schools, my my kids, or so the school district that we're in, the elementary school teaches Rockefeller habit. Mark, we lost video.
No, I see myself.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
I,
All
gu-
right.
I guess when you take green and purple and orange, you get black.
Yeah,
so-
yeah. Apparently. And
there
there
he's
we are.
back.
All right. Well, that was interesting. We'll dive into that deeper later on. But so Rockefeller habits. So they're teaching like sharpening the saw, begin with the end in mind. But they don't call them Rockefeller habits. They call them, well, all right. Give us a second. Oh, it's a power issue. Got it. Anyway, so they're teaching Rockefeller habits without calling them Rockefeller habits. So they're talking about this, and I was like, you know what? Like, I need to read a book on because I always hear about them. Like, they're referenced a lot. So it's like, so anyway, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits is one I just finished up reading. So it's a good one.
Yeah. So Josh, you got to tell us what book you're reading, and while you type it in there, I agree with you. What resonates most. So just because I'm saying I don't finish each book, I equally believe that some people need to finish the book. If you look at the DISC matrix, some people have to see the whole picture before they can start working on things. So I'm just saying what potentially works for me, but just get started is what the critical part. But if Josh is still on here, I'd love to know what book he's reading or anybody else's books. Put them in the comment because they're phenomenal. They're a good way to get started. So just real quick, because I know we're at time pretty much. FinTech.
Yes.
I've stressed this. I want to continue to stress this. Even if you can only come for a day, come for a day. You'll see, like me, there all week. I can tell you that being there all week is a long week, right? Not away from my business, but just away from everything else. And especially if you've never been to this before, 4 or 5 days can be not overwhelming, but almost too much info overload. So you've got to start building capacity. So if I were to give a recommendation, if you could only take a day or two off of work or afford it or whatever it looks like, come in early Tuesday morning and leave late Wednesday night. That way you've made it to some of the learning classes, you've made it to the party, you've made it to the keynote, and you've made it to the showroom. You've hit everything. Perfect. Now, I think that's fast, and you risk, flight delays and things of that nature. But I was trying to figure out what 2 days are most critical. I think it's Tuesday to Wednesday. Joe, I don't know if you have a different opinion, but I think that's why some people don't end up coming is because they think I can't give up a week. We'll just give up 2 days.
No, I agree. I mean, a week is a long time to be anywhere, and it's especially if you haven't been to a FinTech, you almost need to do it that way. 2, 3, 4 days. If you can only do 2 days, do 2 days. But you're right. So catch some education. Opening party, I want to make sure we talk about that. Opening party is Tuesday evening.
Yes, sir.
Is there at the facility. So there's so many reasons why this show is going to work really well. One is that all the hotels surround the convention center. So no matter where you're staying, you're walking distance. Everything going on most everything I've seen scheduled is at the convention center. Especially the opening party. So as long as you stay somewhere close, you're always in the middle of the action. There's been some years where things were kind of here, there, they're in different places, right? And so it was like, well, I don't know if I can get to this place or that place. Everything's at the convention center, everything that I've seen, especially the opening party. So can you give us an idea what that opening party looks like, maybe for someone that hasn't been there? What is the opening party?
Yeah, so we designed it originally. Chance and I designed it to kind of level the playing field. We didn't want to make it about the fencers. We didn't want to make it about the vendors. We just wanted to make it about everybody. We wanted an opportunity to celebrate everybody because for the vendors, they're going to have to work a whole week on the showroom floor. And I can tell you, energy meets energy. And you might not get the best version of somebody on the showroom floor because they've either been trying to talk to too many people into the week, or sometimes in the week people, that's when they get their not sales pitch, but they get the presentation down and they're actually even better than they were on Wednesday or whatever the case is. And so Tuesday's an opportunity to level the playing field, everybody just getting together, hanging out, because at the end of the day, I'm super big friends with all my vendors, and or I call them partners, but and then everything else. But so that's one, but it's also a reason to get people in just a little early, because everyone's like, oh, I'll just wait till Wednesday morning, and then flights get delayed or whatever else. And so, but what we identified by doing this party was it created some open conversation with people. So that way, when they did go to the showroom floor to the classes, it was a lot more intentional. And I heard so many people got new friends out of that. But if you get 2,000 to 3,000 people together, that's where the energy starts vibing. And some people might be coming to FinTech broken or burnt out or distracted or overwhelmed. And so my hope is that the opening party is kind of like an icebreaker. It gets you kind of reset, re-energized. Even if it's just for a day, we got you. And so we've got it super designed beautifully. We weren't thrilled we had to do it at the convention center, but if y'all want to know exactly why, it's because the logistics made more sense, and we thinking through all things, including the different alcohol policies and stuff like that. We thought through everything, and this is the best for you.
Yeah.
It's not the best for what I thought would be best.
Well, the opening party was in the convention center at Nashville as well. And I thought it was great.
We just don't want it to. And we did too. We just don't want to turn into like an expected convention center. If there's a better place to have it, we'll always be looking for it. There's something to be, and so we just don't want anybody to think that we're just going to hit the easy button, do the convention center. But this one made perfect sense. I love start with why. And then I love Michael, I can't even pronounce his name. I think he has a cool motormike.com is his website. Yeah.
McAllowitz.
Because I love McAllowitz. I think it's motormike.com or whatever, because nobody can pronounce his name. And ego is the enemy. I love the saying, ego ain't your amigo. But so the party's going to be cool. I think we're going from like 6:30 to 9:30. So just show up. Like if you were one of those people like to be fashionably late, you will miss it. It's just a quick 30 hours. For those who want to go out afterwards, if you go out with the boys, you better wake up with the men. There's education and stuff like that. So we strategically ended it early enough to where everybody can get in bed and, be present in the presentation, support the leaders who are donating their efforts and energy preparing the presentations. And it's still a long week. And so it's going to be awesome.
Excellent.
So
show floor is a little bit different this year in that it is Wednesday at noon. So keynote is directly before the grand opening. So it's Wednesday midday is keynote, noon show floor opens. So Wednesday afternoon, all day Thursday, and then Friday morning. And for me, that's a little departure from normal. What I typically remember is it's usually Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So be sure when you're booking flights that you understand that everything's shifted a little bit. To your point, get there Tuesday. If there's flight delays, whatever, you got time for it. You still get to the keynote. We actually were interviewing keynote. Well, you guys will see it here in a couple of weeks. We're interviewing Monday, I believe. It's supposed to be killer. Like all the research I've done on this gentleman, Van, great. You will not want to miss it, I promise you. So Wednesday midday, Wednesday noon, show floor opens, all day Thursday, half day Friday. It's going to be a great show. Great show.
It is. Nick Reich worked on the education, and I don't know if this is totally accurate or not, but we condensed down some of the education. So there's a few less sessions so people can make it to like there wasn't as many missed. And also like things like the leadership, we listen to feedback, and the Leadership Academy is designed for a day and a half, but we wanted to get people in other rooms. And so we condensed down the content to a day. And so we're not going to rush through the content, but we're going to use the AFA learning portal to make up the next couple hours, right? So we're going to do some learning online, which is going to be a super amazing product that we've already rolled out, but it's going to take some time to build up enough content. And then we're going to start really utilizing Zooms or Teams or however we choose to do it, because it's great to come to these conferences, but then what? And so doing some accountability check and some follow-ups. And so we're really looking forward to all that, but we're accepting the feedback and moving very nimble. So I'm really excited about all of it. It's going to be great.
I love it. I love it. Love it. So Josh had asked, is the Salt Lake interview going to hit soon? So Josh, the Salt Lake content's out. We did a shop tour with Josh Rand, Aloha Fence, but also we did a tour of the Salt Palace, not a tour of it, but kind of a what to see around the Salt Palace there in Salt Lake City. So you guys, Mark, do you remember the title of that particular video? Mark will find it. Yeah, if you search FinTech 2025 on the channel, it will find it. Promise. All right, but it's going to be great. It really is. There's so many places to stay. There's so much transportation. You don't have to worry about Airbnb. You don't have to worry about renting a car. They've got all sorts of public transportation. I'm sure all the hotels are running shuttles as well. Yeah, and if you're into snow sports, this is the place for you.
Yeah, Matt Lowry is putting together some stuff. So if you plan to snowboard or want to snowboard after FinTech, maybe you can send him a ping. He loves being around people, so give him a ping. He's got a trip put together. And then I wanted to give one plug to. Can I give a quick plug to Job Nimbus? Would you mind if I? Of
course.
Okay, great. So Job Nimbus's home base is there, and so if you work with them, or you don't have a CRM at all, and there's a lot of great CRMs out there depending on what your objectives are, but I think this is where I probably lacked most early on was I went to these shows and didn't take advantage of the show, right? And the show is to put the people in the room. So Job Nimbus is going to have a pretty big group in the convention center, but since they are local, you could actually go visit their facility and feel the energy that's going around that room, but also get some work on as well. So I don't want the trip to be unused for those advantages too. And Job Nimbus has been great for us. But of course, there's tons of other CRMs. So talking about interviewing, they'll all be there. Just if you're already currently using Job Nimbus, maybe go ahead and grab them and make your Job Nimbus even better.
Yeah.
So
I mean, what a campus! What a campus!
Yeah,
they've got a great facility for sure.
Yeah, and talking about traction, they practice EOS, and so their business just seems very. I mean, there's chaos as always, but seems very predictable. And so, if you have Job Nimbus, if you didn't know, they're right there. I was just thinking because Josh is probably going to have tons of us hitting him up saying, "Hey, Josh, can we come by your shop? we don't want to be digging holes in the snow or pounding posts in the snow like you've been posting, but." But we might want to come see your shop or whatever. But I'm super excited for all of it.
Great. It really is, and it makes sense that the pre-registrations. I'm stoked to hear it's 1,000. The last I'd heard was 700. But that was several weeks ago. So it just continues to climb because guys. Whether it's 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, whatever, make time to get there. It's a great time, at least in our part of the country. It's a great time for us to get away. It's right before season hits. We've been cooped up all winter. We're ready to go somewhere, and we're ready to find some new ideas maybe for 2025 to bring back to our campsite to try to show people maybe, hey, here's some places that we're going to find some efficiencies possibly.
I got to say one last thing on that note, because I'm hearing it echo in my mind right now. I don't have enough money to go. And I used to be that person too. And it doesn't mean that you don't have enough money. You're just trying to be a good steward and not putting your money there, right?
Sure.
Well, reach out to me, purplecoaching.com, and I will tell you how I've maximized my points. I have not bought a flight in multiple years. All my teams fly off points. We stay in our hotels off points. And I can tell you right now, I would love to help you if you already have a credit card and you're doing cash back, like you're paying taxes on that. And just give me an opportunity to talk to you about it. But there's the money to get there and stay there should be solved with your Amex points. And obviously when you're there, you got to spend some cash, but you're going to spend some cash on food, whether you're at home or whatever else. But there should be no reason as much money as we spend on cost of goods sold for you not to maximize your points. And I can talk to points offline if y'all want to hear about how that works. And then for the ones who have too many points, I can talk to y'all about switching your points into a Schwab investment account so you don't get hit on short-term capital gains. And I can talk to you about long-term capital gains and a shorter tax burden.
I love that. I love that. So Ken
Sorry,
Throckmorton
I had to
says,
go on a note there.
no. I think that's a whole conversation in itself too. And it is. These are great. Ken says it's over 2,000. Over 2,000 as far as registrants. There we go.
And I think we
Yeah.
get like 45% or 35% the day of too. Like,
Yeah.
so it's going to be
Yeah.
killer. It's going to be
Well,
killer.
we're still 6
But
weeks out.
yeah, but listen, even if you can't go this year, start planning on how you can go next year. And I think that's
Yeah.
where everybody ends up landing up. Is like, man, I'm not going to be able to go next year. We'll go ahead and put it in the plan of the budget or whatever it is to go next year. And
Next year's
some people.
Indianapolis.
Yeah, I know Shane Catton and Jacob Barnes. They're chomping at the bits on it. I coached some people in Indianapolis. I'm really excited about bringing it home. I feel like
great.
Indianapolis is one of my homes now. So,
I
anyways, well,
love it.
Joe, I appreciate you, my man. I know
Of
we could
course.
probably stay on all day, but
we
we'll have to tune
could.
back in.
Well, that's right. We'll just have to get on the calendar again and schedule another one because I know we've chipped at 2 or 3 other topics here that probably deserve to have their own episode. Always happy to have you on. Always happy to have those conversations. Robert, if someone wanted to get a hold of you and learn more about some things we've talked about today, how would they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so go to the website first, purplecoaching.com. That way you can either find a form to fill out or my phone number. If you got a pen and paper ready, it's 817-995-0394, Robert at purplecoaching.com. You can always jump on my Calendly link. It's on the website, so you can book an appointment. I'm willing to give you whatever you need. But in reality, I also just want to be your friend at times too, or I got somebody who wants to be your friend too. So whatever that looks like, but purplecoaching.com probably get you started figuring out what we could do. I think one of the questions was, how do you pick a coach? Just go to my website and check it out, and you'll see what we're about. Or in Nashville, not Nashville. In Nashville, I was all in purple. People found me. In Salt Lake, I will be in purple, so you can find me. And it's a long week for the people like me, you, and Tony's, and Sean's, and everything, because we want to put ourselves out there. So we're not resting in our room. We're out there because we want to connect with people. And so super excited to see everybody. But purplecoaching.com would be the best way.
I love it. Guys, if you got any additional questions, feel free to reach out. Also, if you guys are watching this as a recorded conversation, you can still drop your comments and questions in the comments below. I'll forward them to Robert, or I'll keep an eye on answering questions that you guys have for me. Always happy to interact with you guys in the chat, even after the lives are over. Robert, thank you so much again for making time available on a Saturday morning. I know this time slot isn't the most ideal, so I appreciate you making time.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thank you so much, Joe. You're doing great things, buddy.
Appreciate it. Guys, thank you for watching. For now, Joe Everest, the fence expert, reminding you that good fences, Robert?
Build great neighbors.
There you go. We'll see you guys next time.